I woke up and there it was, a chair staring at me. I swear I didn't put it there. It was positioned directly at the foot of my bed, angled just enough that if someone had been sitting in it, they would have had a perfect view of my face while I slept. The bedroom door was still closed. The windows were locked. The air felt wrong, colder than it should have been, like the room had exhaled while I was unconscious. For a few seconds, I didn't move. The chair wasn't new. It was mine. A plain wooden dining chair I kept in the kitchen. Light oak. Slight crack along the left leg. I knew that chair. I knew where it belonged. Not here. The floorboards creaked softly as if adjusting to weight, though nothing touched them. The shadows near my closet shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to make me question whether they had moved at all. The ceiling fan was off, but I could hear the faintest wooden ticking sound, irregular and dry. It took me a moment to realize it was the chair settling, or breathing. I told myself I must have dragged it in last night. Maybe I'd needed it for something. Maybe I'd been too tired to remember. That explanation should have comforted me. It didn't, because I don't sleepwalk. I don't rearrange furniture in the dark. And I would have remembered placing something directly in front of my bed like an audience. The worst part wasn't that it was there. It was that it was facing me, not angled toward the window, not pushed aside carelessly. It had been placed deliberately, precisely, as if someone had wanted a clear view. You don't wake up with something watching you and go back to normal. You can't. And the more I stared at that empty chair, the more I understood something I wish I didn't. The chair wasn't the problem. It was the fact that it had already been used. Before that morning, my bedroom was the safest place I knew. I live alone. Small apartment. 3rd floor. The kind of place where you can hear your neighbors argue about laundry at 2 in the morning and pretend it's white noise. My room isn't special. Queen-sized bed pushed against the far wall. Nightstand cluttered with half-read books and a phone charger that only works if you bend it at a dangerous angle. Closet door that never fully shuts unless you slam it. It's predictable. That's why I like it. Every night, I follow the same routine. Lock the front door. Check it twice. Sometimes 3 times if I've been watching something that gets into my head. Turn off the kitchen light. Bathroom light. Leave the hallway lamp on for exactly 30 seconds while I brush my teeth, then switch it off before stepping into my room. I always close my bedroom door before sleeping. Always. I scroll on my phone for a bit. Set an alarm. Plug it in. Fan off. Blanket up to my chest. I sleep on my back more often than I should. I know that because I've read enough late-night horror threads to know that's apparently the worst position. Face up, fully exposed, as if you're volunteering for whatever stands in the corner. I used to laugh at stories like that. You know the ones. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. and something was watching me posts. The my chair kept moving every night stories. The comment sections are always the same. People pointing out obvious explanations, debunking shadows, blaming carbon monoxide, sleep paralysis, stress. I was one of those people. I like logic. Logic keeps things small, explainable, harmless. And my room had always been harmless. Sure, there were little things. But every house has little things. Sometimes I'd wake up convinced I heard a footstep in the hallway. Probably the upstairs neighbor. Old buildings shift. Wood contracts. Pipes knock. That's what buildings do. A sock would go missing, then show up 2 days later in the laundry basket when I could have sworn I'd already checked there. Once, I found my closet door open a few inches when I distinctly remember shutting it. But the latch is loose. It never closes properly. It's not dramatic. It's just old. One night, I woke up to what felt like someone sitting on the edge of the bed. A slight dip in the mattress. I jolted upright, and the feeling disappeared. I blamed it on a dream. You know how the brain does that. Half asleep, half hallucinating. I even joked about it to a friend. Guess I've got a ghost roommate who doesn't pay rent. Dark humor makes everything manageable. There were shadows too, but that's cheating. Shadows exist wherever there's light. Car headlights pass by. Tree branches sway. Your brain fills in the blanks because it's wired to detect movement. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth worrying about. If you're listening to this and thinking, those were signs, trust me, I've replayed it all. Every creak, every misplaced object, every half second of unease I shrugged off. When you hear enough stories, you start spotting patterns. And maybe that's what makes this worse. Because I did know the patterns. I just didn't think they applied to me. My bedroom felt cozy, familiar, controlled. It smelled faintly like detergent and old wood. The carpet was worn exactly where my feet hit the floor every morning. The ceiling had a tiny crack shaped like a lightning bolt I'd stared at countless nights when I couldn't sleep. It was mine. Nothing in that space should have felt foreign. Which is why, standing there that morning, heart slow but heavy, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had quietly crossed a line. The chair was still at the foot of my bed, unmoved, perfectly centered. And for the first time since moving into that apartment, my room didn't feel like mine anymore. It wasn't where I left it, and I hadn't moved it. After standing there for a solid minute that first morning, I convinced myself the only reasonable thing to do was put the chair back where it belonged. I grabbed it, half expecting it to be warm or heavier than usual, and carried it into the kitchen. It felt normal, light, solid, just wood and screws and gravity. I slid it under the dining table and made sure all four legs were evenly planted. I even nudged it in a little farther than usual, almost flush against the table leg. I stood there staring at it like I was waiting for applause. See, I muttered to myself. Problem solved. The rest of the day felt stupidly ordinary. Work emails, microwave dinner, background noise from a TV show I wasn't really watching. I avoided thinking about the morning because the more I replayed it, the less it made sense. I went to bed that night with the same routine. Locked door, closed windows, bedroom door shut. I remember hesitating before turning off the light. The room looked the way it always did. Bed, nightstand, closet, empty floor at the foot of my bed. Empty. I told myself that mattered. I woke up around 2:43 a.m. to the sound of wood scraping softly against carpet. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a slow, dry drag. My eyes adjusted to the dark in pieces. First the outline of my dresser, then the door, then the chair. It was back, not exactly where it had been the first night. This time it was slightly off-center, angled a few degrees to the left, like someone had shifted mid-conversation. My throat went dry. No, I whispered. I hadn't gotten up. I would have remembered. I'm not that deep of a sleeper. And even if I had sleepwalked, why would I place it there again? Why face it toward my bed? I sat up slowly, watching it. The air felt colder than before. Not freezing, just sharp. The kind of cold that makes your skin tighten. I could feel a faint draft against my ankles, even though the windows were locked. I listened. The apartment was quiet. No neighbors. No pipes knocking. Just that oppressive, padded silence that feels like it's pressing inward. You're being stupid, I said under my breath. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood up. The carpet felt colder near the chair. Not dramatically, but noticeably, as if that spot hadn't been warmed by the rest of the room. I circled it. Nothing unusual. No scratches on the floor. No sign it had been dragged from the kitchen. No trail. Just there, waiting. The shadows behind it seemed thicker somehow. Not darker exactly, just heavier. My eyes kept trying to adjust to them, but they didn't sharpen into anything recognizable. They just lingered. I grabbed the chair again, this time harder than necessary, and pulled it toward the hallway. The legs didn't scrape. They didn't resist. It moved smoothly, obediently. I left it outside my bedroom door. Not in the kitchen, right outside. If you're in my head, I muttered, prove it. I don't know why I said that. Maybe I was trying to feel in control. Maybe I wanted to catch myself in the act if this was some subconscious thing. I shut my bedroom door firmly. Locked it. Yes, locked it. There's a small privacy lock on the inside. I've never used it before. That night, I did. I lay back down, heart beating harder than I wanted to admit. For a while, nothing happened. Then, faintly, a single, deliberate creak. Not from the hallway, from inside the room. My eyes snapped open. The chair was at the foot of my bed again. Closer this time. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. The chair was closer. Not by much, maybe 6 inches, but enough that I could see the grain of the wood more clearly in the thin blue wash of moonlight. Enough that if someone had been sitting in it, their knees would have almost touched the edge of my mattress. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared at it until morning. When the light finally crept in through the blinds, the room looked stupidly normal again. Beige carpet, white walls, my own furniture, the chair just there. I got up slowly and approached it like it might react. Up close, it was just a chair, but I needed proof it was real. I crouched down and ran my fingers along the legs. The wood was smooth, except for the familiar crack on the left side. No new damage. No splinters. No marks from being dragged across carpet repeatedly. I flipped it over. Dust clung to the underside, undisturbed. No fresh streaks. No fingerprints in the faint layer of grime. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. I inspected every inch. Edges, screws, the seat's underside. Nothing. You're losing it, I whispered to myself. I carried it back to the kitchen again, this time deliberately. I placed it under the table and took a picture. Then I stepped back and took another, making sure the table legs and tiles were clearly visible for reference. Proof of position. If it moved again, I'd know. That day at work, I couldn't focus. I kept opening the photos, zooming in, studying them like there would be some hidden detail I'd missed. Around noon, I finally texted my friend Aaron. Me. Random question. Have you ever sleepwalked and moved furniture? Aaron. That's not random. Me. Hypothetically. Aaron, no. What? I hesitated before typing. Me. I keep waking up and my kitchen chair is in my bedroom. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Aaron, dude. Check your carbon monoxide detector. Of course. That's what everyone says. I'd said it to people before. I checked it that afternoon when I got home. Pressed the test button. Loud, shrill beep. Working perfectly. I sent him a picture. Aaron. Okay, hidden camera prank. Me. I live alone. Aaron. Then maybe you don't. I stared at that message longer than I should have. That night, I escalated. I dragged the chair into the center of the living room and tied one of its legs to the heavy radiator pipe using a thick extension cord. I pulled it tight, no slack. The radiator wasn't going anywhere without taking half the wall with it. Then I set my phone up on the coffee table and started recording video. Let's see you move now, I muttered. When I went to bed, I left my bedroom door open on purpose. If it moved, I'd hear it. If it moved, I'd have proof. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound was amplified. The refrigerator humming. A distant car passing. The faint tick of cooling metal in the walls. At some point, I must have drifted off. I woke to the sensation of being watched. That's not poetic. It was physical. A pressure on my face. A tightening in my chest. I opened my eyes slowly. The chair was at the foot of my bed again. Closer. Close enough that the front legs were nearly touching the frame. The extension cord lay coiled loosely on the carpet beside it. Not broken. Untied. Just undone. My heart slammed against my ribs. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I scrambled out of bed and ran into the living room. The radiator pipe was still there. The cord was still looped around it, except the knot I had tied was gone. The cord looked as if it had never been secured in the first place. My hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table and opened the recording. The video showed the living room exactly as I'd left it. Chair tied to radiator. Cord tight. Nothing unusual. Hours passed in seconds as I fast-forwarded. At 2:17 a.m., the screen glitched. Not dramatically, just a brief distortion, like static crawling across the image for less than a second. When the picture stabilized, the chair was gone. No movement captured. No sliding. No tugging against the cord. Just gone. The radiator pipe stood bare. The extension cord lay slack on the floor. I replayed that moment again and again, frame by frame. There was no visible cut, no shadow crossing the lens, no figure entering the room. The chair didn't move. It simply wasn't there anymore. My throat felt tight. My thoughts started spiraling. I searched online that night. Furniture moving on its own. Object appears in bedroom repeatedly. Chair facing bed meaning. Most results were jokes, pranks, sleep paralysis forums. But buried in a thread on some obscure discussion board was something that made my stomach drop. A user had written about invited objects. They described items that don't belong in certain rooms. Objects that appear facing beds. Watching. They claimed the rule was simple. If you acknowledge it, it moves closer. If you restrain it, it adapts. If it faces you, it's already been used. I closed the laptop immediately. I told myself it was nonsense. Internet horror bait. The kind of thing people make up for attention. But the chair had moved closer each night, and I had definitely acknowledged it. I went back to my bedroom slowly. The chair sat there, inches from my bed, angled slightly upward as if the seat were tilted toward me. The shadows behind it looked deeper now. Thicker, less like absence of light, and more like something occupying space. I stepped closer despite every instinct telling me not to. "Why here?" I whispered. The air shifted. A faint sound brushed against my ear. Not a word. Not quite a whisper. More like the shape of a breath forming something almost human. I froze. In the corner of my vision, something seemed to lean, just slightly, behind the chair. When I turned my head fully, there was nothing there. But I understood something then that made everything worse. The chair wasn't moving randomly. It was repositioning, and whatever it was making space for wasn't visible yet. I stopped sleeping. Not completely. The body doesn't allow that. It takes what it needs eventually. But I stopped trusting sleep. That's different. I'd lie there for hours, eyes burning, staring at the silhouette at the foot of my bed like it was a loaded weapon pointed at my chest. Because that's what it felt like. A threat waiting for permission. Every night, the chair moved a little closer. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would convince anyone else. But I measured. I started marking the carpet fibers with tiny, nearly invisible threads pulled upright as reference points. I memorized the exact distance between the front legs and my bed frame. 6 inches. 4 inches. 2. The first night it touched the bed, I laughed. It wasn't a healthy laugh. It came out sharp and thin and didn't sound like mine. "Well," I whispered into the dark, "congratulations." My life outside the apartment started slipping in small, humiliating ways. I forgot meetings. Burned toast because I'd been staring at nothing for too long. At work, someone asked if I was sick. I told them I'd just been binge reading horror threads. Which wasn't a lie. I went back to those forums. The deep ones. The posts with low upvotes and long comment chains where people argue about whether something is supernatural or neurological. I didn't post. I just read. There were patterns. Objects facing beds. Items appearing where they shouldn't be. Things that move incrementally. The rule of escalation. The idea that attention feeds it. Some users insisted it was mass hysteria. Sleep paralysis layered with anxiety. Carbon monoxide again. Always carbon monoxide. Others described something else. They called them staging objects. According to them, the object isn't the entity. It's the preparation. The chair isn't watching. It's reserving space. I closed the tab every time I read that. Then I'd open it again 10 minutes later. During the day, I tried to be rational. I recorded myself sleeping from different angles. I set up 2 cameras instead of 1. I left all the lights on. I slept with the TV playing at low volume just to disrupt the silence. The footage always glitched at the same time, between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. Never dramatically, just enough. A flicker, a distortion, and then the chair would be closer. One morning, I found it pressed firmly against the mattress. The wood dented the fabric slightly, like it had been leaning there for hours. I hadn't felt it move. That's what scared me most. I started imagining weight in the chair. Not visibly, just pressure. Like if I blinked too slowly, I'd see the seat dip. I told myself it was stress. Sleep deprivation does things to you. It blurs the edges of reality, makes shadows seem thicker, makes silence feel intentional. I'd catch myself staring at the chair during the day and thinking I saw something perched in it. Not a shape, not a figure, just an absence that felt occupied. I tried dark humor again. Maybe I should charge rent, I muttered one afternoon, sitting on the edge of my bed, eyes locked on it. The joke didn't land, because somewhere in the back of my mind, I had the creeping suspicion that something already had paid for that seat. I stopped inviting people over, not because I thought they'd see something, but because I was terrified they wouldn't. What if they walked into my bedroom and saw nothing unusual? What if the chair only behaved for me? That possibility gnawed at me more than any ghost theory. If it's real, I'm in danger. If it's not, I'm unraveling. I started testing myself. I'd leave the apartment for hours, then come back unexpectedly to see if the chair was in place. I'd deliberately ignore it all day, refusing to look at it, pretending it didn't exist. It still moved. Sometimes I'd wake up certain I heard breathing, not from the chair, from above it, like someone standing behind it, leaning slightly forward, watching me sleep. One night, I forced myself to reach out and touch the backrest while lying in bed. My fingers brushed cold wood, and for a split second, I swear it felt like something flinched. I pulled my hand back immediately, heart racing. That was the moment I realized something dangerous. I wasn't just afraid anymore. I was waiting to see what it would do next. Waiting for the final reveal. Waiting for proof that would either validate my fear or destroy my sanity. And that's when I understood the worst part of all. Whatever this was, it wanted me obsessed. Because obsession keeps you looking. And looking means you're facing it. The next night, I decided I wouldn't just watch anymore. I would confront it. I sat down in the chair, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. It took everything in me to do it. The chair had stopped pretending by then. It was pressed firmly against the edge of my bed every night, angled upward, patient. It didn't need to move closer anymore. There was nowhere left to go. So I dragged it back a few inches, just enough space to turn it around. For the first time, it wasn't facing me. I was facing it. The room felt tighter than usual. The walls didn't move, but they felt closer. The air had that same unnatural cold threaded through it, slipping under my sleeves, curling around my neck. Enough, I said, and my voice sounded thin. I positioned the chair in the center of the room, directly beneath the ceiling crack shaped like lightning, exactly where I would see everything. Then I sat down. The wood was colder than it should have been. The second my weight settled into the seat, the room changed. Not visually, atmospherically. The silence thickened. The hum of the refrigerator in the other room vanished. The distant city noise dissolved. Even my own breathing sounded muted, like I was underwater. My bed was in front of me now, empty. For a split second, I felt ridiculous. A grown adult sitting in a chair at 2 in the morning, staring at their own bed like it had personally offended them. See, I muttered. Nothing. That's when I felt it. A shift in pressure behind me. Not air moving. Space moving. The back of my neck prickled. Every instinct screamed not to turn around, but I didn't need to, because I understood. The chair had never been watching me. It had been positioned for this angle, for this view. From where I sat, I could see the entire mattress clearly, the indentation where my body usually lay, the pillow slightly creased, the blanket folded near the bottom, and then the mattress dipped, slowly, right where my chest would have been. I stopped breathing. The indentation deepened, like someone had just settled onto the bed. Not dramatically, just enough to be undeniable. "No," I whispered. The blanket shifted inward slightly, compressing under invisible weight. Something was sitting where I usually slept, watching the chair, watching me. The temperature dropped sharply. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. And then I heard it. A whisper. Not from the bed, from directly behind my head. "You weren't supposed to sit there." The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't monstrous. It sounded almost tired. I squeezed my eyes shut, heart hammering so hard I thought I might black out. "This isn't real," I said, forcing the words out. "Sleep deprivation, stress, hallucination." A soft exhale brushed against my ear. "You moved it." The mattress dipped deeper. The invisible weight leaned forward slightly, as if adjusting posture. I opened my eyes slowly. From this angle, the indentation looked wrong. Too precise. The shape suggested shoulders. A torso, knees slightly bent, like someone leaning forward in a chair. Except the chair was occupied by me. Understanding hit me all at once, sharp and nauseating. The chair wasn't reserving space for something to watch me. It was reserving space for me to watch it. I had been lying in the wrong position. Every night I slept, something had been sitting in that chair, staring at the bed. Not at me, at itself, or at what was supposed to be there. The voice came again, softer this time. "You took my place." The air behind me grew heavier, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the outline of something standing inches away. If I leaned back even slightly, I would make contact. The mattress indentation shifted again. The invisible figure on the bed tilted its head. I could feel its attention like a weight pressing into my face. "You acknowledged it," the voice whispered. "You measured it. You tied it down." My throat tightened. "You faced it." The shadows in the corners of the room thickened, stretching subtly toward the center. The crack in the ceiling seemed darker, deeper. "You sat down." The pressure behind me increased. And then, the chair creaked. Not from my movement, from weight. Additional weight. The wood strained softly beneath me, as if it were accommodating someone else. I felt the faintest dip beside my thighs. A presence settling into the seat with me. I didn't look. I couldn't. My eyes stayed locked on the bed. The indentation on the mattress slowly began to rise. Not because the weight was leaving, because it was standing up. The blanket slid slightly toward the edge of the bed, toward the chair, toward me. The thing behind me leaned closer. Its breath was cold. "You're facing the wrong way," it murmured. I understood then. The chair was never the threat. The rule wasn't about acknowledgement. It was about orientation. Something in this room requires a witness. And for nights, maybe longer than I realized, I had been lying in the position meant for it, watching nothing, while it watched everything. The pressure beside me increased until the wood groaned under strain. The air in front of me warped slightly, like heat distortion, but cold. The shape that had been on the bed was no longer visible as an indentation. It was standing between the bed and the chair, blocking my view of where I used to sleep. "You can't leave it empty," the voice said. The shadows swallowed the edges of the room. The only clear thing left in my vision was the space directly in front of the chair, directly in front of me. And I realized, too late, what the chair had been positioning for all along. Not to watch, to replace. Something shifted. The weight beside me vanished. The chair felt suddenly lighter. Very, very light. And from somewhere behind my eyes, deep, Internal, wrong. I felt myself leaning forward, as if preparing to stand. I didn't stand up. That's the first thing you need to understand. I felt the impulse, felt something inside me tilt forward, like gravity had shifted, but I forced my body to stay seated. My hands gripped the edges of the chair so hard my knuckles burned. Because the moment I realized what the chair represented, everything clicked into place. The chair was never mine. It had been in my kitchen when I moved in, sure. Just another piece of leftover furniture from the previous tenant. I never questioned it. It matched nothing else in the apartment. Different wood, slightly older style, but it was useful, so I kept it. I never thought to ask why it had been left behind. The crack in the leg, the uneven finish, the way it always felt slightly colder than the others. It wasn't part of my furniture. It was part of the room, and the room had rules. The indentation on the bed didn't move closer again. It didn't need to. The shape standing between the bed and the chair wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a distortion, like the air itself had been folded into a human outline. And it wasn't angry. It was patient. You sat down. The voice repeated, softer now. I understood what that meant. For nights, maybe longer than I could measure, something had been occupying that chair, facing the bed. Not haunting it. Not stalking me. Waiting. The chair wasn't reserving space for an entity to watch me sleep. It was reserving space for a replacement. Someone has to sit. Someone has to face the bed. Someone has to watch. If the seat is empty, something fills it. If someone else sits there, the role transfers. That's why it moved closer each night. Not to threaten me, to guide me, to align me with it, to make sure I understood where I was supposed to be. You weren't supposed to lie there, it whispered. My bed, my safe, predictable bed, wasn't mine either. Not in the way I thought. It was a stage, a focal point, a place that required an observer. The apartment wasn't haunted. It was structured, like a circuit. The bed, the chair, the space between. If no one occupies the chair, something else does. And it watches, always facing forward, always still. I tightened my grip on the wood and forced myself to speak. I'm not replacing you. The distortion flickered slightly. You already did. The weight that had briefly shared the seat with me was gone. Completely gone. The air behind me felt empty now. Not safe, just vacant. The shape near the bed thinned, stretched, and then collapsed inward, like a breath being inhaled. The mattress rose fully flat again. The blanket settled. The temperature began to normalize. The shadows retreated to their corners. The room looked like it always had. Ordinary, familiar, mine. But the chair creaked softly beneath me. Not from strain, from balance, as if it had settled into its intended configuration. I don't know how long I sat there after that. Minutes, hours. The sun eventually began to bleed through the blinds, casting pale lines across the floor. Nothing moved. Nothing whispered. The room was quiet again. It's finally over. I just needed someone to know. That's what I've been telling myself. Because here's the part that matters. The part that keeps this from being just another sleep-deprived breakdown story. The chair hasn't moved since. Not once. It stays exactly where I leave it now. Facing the bed. I don't sleep there anymore. I can't. I drag the mattress into the living room. I tell myself it's temporary. A rearrangement. A phase. But every night, before I lie down, I walk back into the bedroom and check. The chair is always in position, perfectly centered, perfectly still. And sometimes, just sometimes, when the apartment is completely silent and I stand in the doorway, I feel the faintest pull in my chest. An urge to sit, to make sure it's done properly, to keep watching. The room looks restored. No shadows stretching, no unnatural cold. No indentations on the mattress. If someone walked in right now, they'd see nothing unusual. That's the worst part. Because this isn't about ghosts. It's about vacancy. About roles that must be filled. And if you ever wake up to find a chair facing your bed, don't measure it. Don't move it. And whatever you do, don't sit down. Life looks normal again. That's the strange part. I go to work. I answer emails. I make coffee in the same chipped mug every morning. If you saw me on the street, you wouldn't think twice. I don't look like someone who spent nights negotiating with something that doesn't need a name. The bedroom is quiet now. Predictable. The air doesn't turn cold. The shadows stay where they belong. The chair hasn't moved in weeks. It doesn't need to. I keep it positioned exactly where it wants to be, facing the bed. I don't test it anymore. I don't measure distances. I don't set up cameras. I learned something about rules. Some spaces require balance. Some objects aren't furniture, they're functions. And some roles exist whether you believe in them or not. I think that's what scares me the most. Not that something was in my room, but that it wasn't malicious. It was procedural. It didn't want me dead. It wanted me seated. I still don't sleep in that room. Maybe I never will. The mattress in the living room feels temporary, like I'm camping inside my own life. But I'd rather be uncomfortable than necessary. Sometimes, late at night, I stand in the doorway and look at the chair. It looks harmless. That's how it should look. If you've ever woken up and found something out of place, something small, explainable, easy to laugh off, maybe you were smarter than I was. Maybe you ignored it. Maybe you didn't give it attention. Good. Keep doing that. Because not every anomaly is random. And not every empty seat is meant to stay empty. I don't know how many rooms are built like mine. I don't know how many chairs are waiting. But if you ever feel the urge to turn something around to see what it sees, resist it. Some perspectives aren't meant for us. And some seats are only empty until someone sits down.